The sound of the rope tightening around her wrists burned like fire as Georgiana Naylor pulled against her binds for the 100th time. The midday sun bore down mercilessly on the dusty plains of Montana Territory, 1879, turning the wooden wagon wheel at her back into a branding iron against her skin. Sweat trickled down her face, mingling with the dried blood on her cheek from where one of Ruckhart's men had struck her. Georgiana had been left to die, a message to her brother, who had refused to sell his claim to the ruthless land baron who controlled half the county. 3 days with minimal water and no food, tied to a wagon wheel at a forgotten crossroads. Her once fine blue dress was now torn and stained, her honey blonde hair falling in dirty tangles around her face. "Someone will come," she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse from screaming for help. But she knew the terrible truth. Ruckhart had chosen this spot because it was miles from the nearest homestead or town. The distant sound of hoofbeats made Georgiana's heart leap. She raised her head, squinting against the sunlight. A lone rider approached, silhouetted against the vast Montana sky. As he drew closer, she could make out his tall frame, the wide-brimmed hat shading his face. And the way he sat easy in the saddle, a man who'd spent his life on horseback. "Help!" she called out, her voice cracking. "Please, help me!" The rider slowed his horse to a walk, approaching cautiously. He dismounted a few yards away, keeping one hand near the gun at his hip. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a striking blue that seemed to pierce right through her. "Well now," he drawled, looking her up and down, taking in her pitiful state. "What do we have here?" "Please," Georgiana begged. "I've been left to die. Cut me loose." The stranger approached slowly, his spurs jingling with each step. "Who did this to you, miss?" "Edgar Ruckhart and his men. They want my brother's land. Please, I haven't had water since yesterday." The man's face hardened at the mention of Ruckhart. "Ruckhart, huh? That explains a lot." He pulled a knife from his belt and moved behind her. Georgiana felt her heart race, uncertain if she'd just traded one danger for another. But then, she felt the blade slide between her wrists and the rope, sawing carefully through her bonds. "The name's Vincent Thornton," he said as he worked. "Most folks call me Vince." As the last of the ropes fell away, Georgiana collapsed forward, her legs too weak to support her after days of standing. Vincent caught her easily, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you," he said, his voice gentler now. "You're safe." With her head spinning from exhaustion and dehydration, Georgiana looked up into the face of her rescuer. Vincent's expression had softened, a hint of protectiveness flashing in his eyes. "She's mine to keep," he declared, though there was no one around to hear it but the wind and the vast Montana sky. It wasn't a statement of ownership, but one of responsibility, a vow of protection. Georgiana wasn't sure if she'd imagined those words as darkness crept in around the edges of her vision. The last thing she felt before losing consciousness was being lifted onto a horse, strong arms holding her securely. When Georgiana awoke, she was lying on a narrow bed in a small but clean cabin. A cool cloth rested on her forehead, and someone had changed her filthy dress for a man's oversized shirt. She tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. "Easy now," came a deep voice from across the room. Vincent rose from a chair by the hearth and approached the bed, carrying a cup of water. "You need to take it slow. You're safe here, but you're still weak." He helped her take small sips of the water, his calloused hand gentle as it supported her head. "Where am I?" she asked when she could speak. "My place? It's about 15 miles northeast of where I found you, well off the main trails. Ruckhart's men won't find you here." "My brother," she began. "I sent word to town with a friend yesterday, asked around about a missing woman, heard your brother's been tearing the territory apart looking for you. Name's Daniel Naylor, right?" Georgiana nodded, relieved. "Yes. We have a homestead north of Promise Creek." "I know it. Good water rights. Prime grazing land." Vincent's mouth tightened. "No wonder Ruckhart wants it. He offered to buy it, but Daniel refused. Then I went missing 3 days ago while riding back from town." Georgiana closed her eyes, remembering the terror of being surrounded by Ruckhart's men, dragged from her horse, and beaten when she fought back. "Your brother should know you're safe by nightfall tomorrow. In the meantime, you need rest and food." Vincent helped her sit up and brought her a bowl of stew. The simple act of eating exhausted her, but the hot food revived her spirits. As she ate, she studied her rescuer in the lamplight. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face was clean-shaven but tanned from years in the sun. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Are you a rancher?" she asked. Vincent shook his head. "Not exactly. I was a cavalry scout for nearly 10 years. Now I do odd jobs, guide hunting parties, track down strays for the big ranchers, live mostly on my own terms." "And now you're harboring a woman with a price on her head," Georgiana said with a weak smile. "Wouldn't be the first time I've crossed Ruckhart," Vincent replied, something dark passing across his features. "Rest now? We'll talk more in the morning." Georgiana didn't want to sleep. There were too many questions, too much to understand about this man who had saved her, but her body had other ideas. As soon as her head touched the pillow, exhaustion claimed her once more. For 3 days, Georgiana recovered her strength in Vincent's cabin, while they waited for word from her brother. Vincent proved to be a surprisingly good cook and an attentive caretaker, though he maintained a respectful distance. During the days, he would leave to check his traps or hunt, bringing back fresh game. In the evenings, he would sit by the fire and tell her stories of his days as a scout, of the people he'd met and the places he'd seen. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as Georgiana sat on the porch enjoying the fresh mountain air, Vincent rode up, leading 2 horses his own, and another that she recognized with a cry of joy. "Buttercup!" she exclaimed, rising to her feet. The Palomino mare nickered in recognition. "Found her wandering near the crossroads," Vincent explained as he dismounted. "Figured she must be yours." Georgiana hurried down the steps to stroke the horse's velvet nose. "She was a gift from my father before he died. I thought Ruckhart's men had taken her." "Must have gotten loose," Vincent said, then hesitated before adding, "I also rode close enough to town to get news. Your brothers put together a search party. They are combing the territory for you." "We should go to them," Georgiana said immediately. Vincent shook his head. "Too risky. Ruckhart's men are watching the trails, and your brother's party is being followed. We need to be smart about this. But I can't just hide here while Daniel worries. I've sent word through a trusted friend. He'll tell your brother you're safe and arrange a meeting." Vincent's expression was serious. "Georgiana, Ruckhart doesn't just want your brother's land. He's looking to make an example of both of you." She felt a chill despite the warm day. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's put a $500 bounty on your head, dead or alive, and 1,000 for your brother." Georgiana sank down onto the porch steps, her legs suddenly weak. "Why?" "We're just homesteaders. We've never done anything to him." Vincent sat beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. "It's not what you've done, it's what you represent. Your brother's land sits on a water source that controls access to the North Valley. Ruckhart wants to run cattle there, but he needs that water. Your refusal to sell stands in his way, and more importantly, it shows others they can stand up to him. So he decided to make me disappear as a message," Georgiana said bitterly. "It's his way, but he made a mistake this time." Vincent's voice dropped lower. "He shouldn't have touched you." There was something in his tone, a personal hatred that went beyond the general dislike most honest folks had for Ruckhart. "You know him, don't you?" Georgiana asked. "Not just by reputation." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the distant mountains. "My father had a small ranch west of here. Nothing special, but it was ours. Ruckhart wanted it for a road to move his cattle. When Pa refused to sell, there was an accident." His jaw clenched. "The barn burned with my pa inside. Sheriff called it an accident, but I knew better." "I'm so sorry," Georgiana whispered. "It was 5 years ago. I was still with the cavalry then. By the time I got back, Ruckhart had already taken the land through some legal trickery. There wasn't enough evidence to prove murder." Georgiana reached out impulsively and laid her hand on his. "And that's why you helped me. You saw a chance to strike back at him." Vincent turned his hand over, his fingers closing around hers. "At first, maybe, but now?" His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an unspoken connection that made her heart beat faster. The moment was broken by the distant sound of a rider approaching. Vincent was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. "Get inside," he ordered, but before Georgiana could move, he relaxed. "It's all right. It's just Hank." A grizzled older man rode into view, looking exhausted. He dismounted with a grunt and nodded to Georgiana. "Madam, pleased to see you looking better than the state Vince described finding you in." "Hank's the friend I mentioned," Vincent explained. "What news?" "Made contact with Daniel Naylor," Hank said, accepting the canteen Vincent offered. "He'll meet you tomorrow night at the old Miller place, sunset." "The Miller place is abandoned," Vincent explained to Georgiana. "It's about halfway between here and Promise Creek." "What about Ruckhart's men?" Georgiana asked anxiously. "They're watching the main trails in the town," Hank confirmed. "But they don't know about the old Indian path through the northern hills. It's how I got here without being followed." Vincent nodded. "We'll take that route tomorrow. You staying the night, Hank?" "Can't. Need to get back before anyone notices I'm missing. Ruckhart's got the whole town spooked. Even the sheriff's walking careful." After Hank departed, Vincent began preparing for their journey the next day. He cleaned his rifles, packed provisions, and studied an old hand-drawn map by lamplight. Georgiana watched him, feeling both gratitude and something deeper taking root in her heart. That night, as they sat by the fire, Georgiana found herself studying Vincent's profile, wondering at the twists of fate that had brought them together. "Why did you say that?" she asked suddenly. "When you cut me free. You said, 'She's mine to keep.'" Vincent looked surprised, then slightly embarrassed. "You heard that, huh? I thought you were too far gone." "I heard. What did you mean?" He poked at the fire, sparks rising into the darkness. "It meant I was taking responsibility for you, that I wasn't just cutting you loose to fend for yourself." "Is that all?" Georgiana pressed, surprising herself with her boldness. Vincent looked up, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "No," he admitted softly. "That's not all." The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities. "I should get some sleep," Georgiana said finally, rising from her chair. "We have a long ride tomorrow." Vincent nodded, but as she passed him, he caught her hand. "Georgiana." He stood, bringing them face to face, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I'm glad I found you, not just because it thwarted Ruckert, but because—" He trailed off, but his eyes said what words couldn't. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over almost before it began. Georgiana stood frozen, her heart racing. Then, following an impulse she couldn't name, she rose on her tiptoes and returned the kiss properly, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders. When they parted, Vincent's expression was a mixture of surprise and something that looked like hope. "Good night, Vincent," she whispered, slipping from his grasp and retreating to the small bedroom he had given up for her use. Alone in the darkness, Georgiana pressed her fingers to her lips, wondering at her own actions. She had never been so forward with a man before, but something about Vincent, his quiet strength, his kindness beneath the tough exterior, called to her in ways she couldn't explain. Morning came with a sense of anticipation and danger. They set out at dawn, taking the hidden trail Hank had mentioned. Vincent rode slightly ahead, alert for any sign of trouble. Georgiana followed on Buttercup, wearing clothes Vincent had procured for her sturdy men's trousers and a shirt that he'd modified to fit her better, along with a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face. "Keep your head down if we pass anyone," he instructed. "From a distance they'll just see two men riding. We should reach the Miller place by mid-afternoon, well before your brother arrives." The trail was narrow and difficult in places, winding through dense forest and across rocky terrain. By midday they had climbed high enough to see the valley spread out below them, a patchwork of green meadows and golden fields. "It's beautiful," Georgiana said during a brief stop to rest the horses. "I've lived here my whole life, but I've never seen it from up here." "The Blackfoot called these mountains the backbone of the world," Vincent said, passing her a strip of dried venison. "They believe the Creator put them here to hold up the sky. You know a lot about the Indians. Worked with them as scouts in the cavalry, learned their ways, their stories." A shadow crossed his face. "Watched the government break promises to them too. Not so different from what men like Ruckert do." They continued their journey, the trail gradually descending toward their destination. As Vincent had predicted, they reached the abandoned Miller homestead by mid-afternoon. The small cabin was weathered but still sound, its windows dark and empty. Vincent approached cautiously, gun drawn, and checked inside before signaling Georgiana to join him. "No one's been here for a while," he said, holstering his weapon. "We'll wait here for your brother." They unsaddled the horses and turned them loose in the overgrown pasture to graze. Inside the cabin, Vincent built a small fire in the stone hearth to drive away the dampness. The single room was sparse: a table, 2 chairs, an old iron bedstead with no mattress. "Samuel Miller and his wife tried to make a go of it here about 10 years back," Vincent explained. "Good people, but the soil's too rocky for farming. They gave up after 2 seasons and headed to Oregon. And no one's claimed it since. It's too remote, too hard to work. Even Ruckhart hasn't bothered with it." Vincent checked the windows, making sure they had clear sightlines in all directions. "Your brother should be here in a few hours. We should be ready to move quickly after he arrives." Georgiana nodded, understanding the unspoken plan. Once reunited with Daniel, they would need to decide whether to return to their homestead and fight or flee the territory altogether. The hours passed slowly. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Vincent grew increasingly tense, checking and rechecking his weapons, peering out the windows at the slightest sound. "Something's wrong," he said finally. "He should have been here by now." "Maybe he was delayed," Georgiana suggested, though anxiety gnawed at her. "Maybe." Vincent didn't sound convinced. "I'm going to check the approach from the south ridge. Stay here, keep the door barred." Before he could leave, the sound of multiple horses approaching made them both freeze. Vincent moved to the window, his expression darkening. "6 riders," he said grimly. "Armed, and that's Ruckhart at the lead." Georgiana's blood ran cold. "Daniel isn't with them." Vincent grabbed his rifle. "They must have intercepted Hank. Or he betrayed us." "Hank wouldn't—" "Every man has his breaking point." Vincent was already moving, gathering their few belongings. "There's a root cellar behind the cabin. The entrance is hidden by brush. Get down there and stay quiet, no matter what happens." "I won't leave you to face them alone," Georgiana protested. Vincent took her by the shoulders, his eyes intense. "Georgiana, please. I can hold them off, maybe lead them away from here, but not if I'm worried about you." The sound of the riders drawing closer made the decision for them. Vincent led her out the back of the cabin to a small, concealed trapdoor covered with deadfall. He pulled it open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. "Stay here until you're sure they're gone," he instructed. "If I don't come back by morning, take the north trail. It will lead you to a trapper named Jenkins. He'll help you." "Vincent," Georgiana began, but he silenced her with a swift, hard kiss. "I'll come back for you," he promised, then gently pushed her down the steps. The last thing she saw before he closed the trapdoor was his face, determined and fierce, memorizing every line of it in case it was the last time. In the musty darkness of the root cellar, Georgiana found an old lantern that still had oil. She lit it with trembling hands, revealing a small space with shelves of ancient preserves and a few forgotten tools. Above, she could hear muffled voices as the riders reached the cabin. "Thornton!" a booming voice called out. "We know you're in there. Come out and bring the Naylor girl with you." There was silence, then the sound of a door being kicked in. Footsteps pounded above her head, more shouting, then a single gunshot that made her flinch. "Search the place! Find her!" Georgiana extinguished the lantern and pressed herself into the farthest corner of the cellar. Praying the trapdoor was as well hidden as Vincent claimed. She heard more gunfire, farther away now, Vincent drawing them off, as he'd promised. The sounds of conflict faded into the distance. For what seemed like hours, Georgiana remained frozen in place, straining to hear any sign of danger. Eventually, silence fell, broken only by the distant hooting of an owl as night descended. Should she emerge? What if Ruckhart's men were still lurking nearby? But what if Vincent was wounded, needing her help? The decision was made for her when the trapdoor suddenly opened, flooding the cellar with moonlight. Georgiana grabbed a rusted hoe, ready to defend herself. "Georgie! Thank God!" "Daniel!" She dropped the hoe and scrambled up the steps into her brother's arms, tears of relief streaming down her face. Daniel Naylor was 28, tall and sturdy like their father had been, with the same honey-blonde hair as Georgiana. His face was haggard with worry, a healing cut visible on his cheek. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, holding her at arm's length to inspect her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, thanks to Vincent." Georgiana looked past her brother anxiously. "Where is he? Did you see him?" Daniel's expression grew grim. "Ruckhart's men were chasing someone on horseback when I arrived. I heard gunfire to the east." "We have to find him!" Georgiana pulled away, searching the darkness. "He saved my life, Daniel. I can't leave him." "Georgie, it's too dangerous. Ruckhart's men are combing these hills." "Then we'll be careful." Her voice brooked no argument. "Vincent risked everything for me. I won't abandon him now." Daniel knew his sister well enough to recognize her determined tone. With a sigh, he nodded. "We'll look, but at the first sign of trouble, we ride for home. I've got men there, ready to defend the place if Ruckhart comes." They saddled the horses and set out carefully, following the eastern trail by moonlight. Georgiana's heart pounded with fear for Vincent. Had he been shot? Captured? The very thought made her stomach twist with dread. They had gone perhaps a mile when Daniel suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. "Listen," he whispered. In the stillness of the night, they could hear the sound of someone moving through the underbrush, someone trying to be quiet, but hindered by injury or exhaustion. Daniel drew his pistol. "Stay behind me." They moved forward cautiously until they reached a small clearing bathed in moonlight. There, leaning against a tree, was Vincent. His shirt was dark with blood on one side, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. "Vincent!" Georgiana cried, dismounting and rushing to his side. He raised his head, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Georgiana," he breathed, "you're safe. You're hurt." She examined the wound in his side. A bullet had grazed him, leaving a nasty furrow across his ribs. "We need to get you back to the cabin." "Can't," Vincent managed. "Ruckhart's men, still looking." "This is my brother, Daniel," Georgiana explained as Daniel approached. "He's come to help us." The two men exchanged nods of acknowledgement, sizing each other up with the wariness of strangers in a dangerous situation. "We need to get moving," Daniel said after a moment. "Can you ride?" Vincent nodded, though he looked doubtful. "Lost my horse, shot out from under me about a mile back." "You'll ride with me," Georgiana decided, helping Vincent to his feet. He leaned heavily on her, his breath coming in pained gasps. With Daniel's help, they got Vincent mounted behind Georgiana on Buttercup. His arms encircled her waist, holding on as they set out at a careful pace, avoiding the main trails. "Where are we going?" Vincent asked, his voice weak in her ear. "Home," she answered simply. "To our homestead. Ruckhart will look for you there." "Let him come," Daniel said grimly from alongside them. "We're done running." By dawn, they had reached the Naylor homestead, a sturdy cabin with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings, nestled in a fertile valley with a creek running through it. 4 men with rifles stood guard on the porch, greeting Daniel with obvious relief. "Any trouble?" Daniel asked as they dismounted. "All quiet," one of the men replied. "Word is Ruckhart's gathered his hands for something big, though." "Then we'll be ready." Daniel helped Georgiana support Vincent into the cabin. Inside, Georgiana directed them to her bedroom, where they laid Vincent on the bed. His wound had stopped bleeding, but needed cleaning. While Daniel went to confer with his men, Georgiana gently removed Vincent's shirt and bathed the injury. "You shouldn't be here," Vincent said, watching her work. "I'm putting you all in danger." "You saved my life," Georgiana replied, applying a poultice of herbs her mother had taught her to make. "I'm not abandoning you now. Ruckhart won't stop. He'll bring more men." "Neither will we." Georgiana wrapped clean bandages around his ribs. "This is our home, Vincent. My parents are buried on that hill. Our future is in this soil. We won't give it up without a fight." Vincent caught her hand. "Why did you come looking for me? You could have escaped with your brother." Georgiana met his gaze steadily. "You know why." His fingers tightened around hers. "Say it anyway." "Because in 3 days, you became more important to me than my own safety." The admission both frightened and exhilarated her. "Because the thought of leaving you behind hurt more than anything Ruckhart could do to me." Vincent's eyes darkened with emotion. He pulled her closer, wincing slightly from the pain in his side, and kissed her not gently this time, but with the desperation of a man who'd faced death and emerged with newfound clarity about what mattered. They were interrupted by Daniel clearing his throat from the doorway. "Sorry," he said, looking uncomfortable, "but we need to prepare. Ryder just came in from town. Ruckhart's gathered at least 20 men. They'll be here by nightfall." Georgiana straightened, her cheeks flushed. "How many can we count on?" "8, including us and Thornton if he's able." "I'm able," Vincent said firmly, attempting to sit up. 8 against 20, Georgiana murmured. "Not good odds." "Better than you might think," Vincent said. "Ruckhart's men are mostly cowhands, not gunfighters. They're used to intimidating unarmed farmers, not facing determined resistance." "And we have the advantage of defending our home ground," Daniel added. "Every approach is visible for half a mile." Vincent nodded. "Still, we need a plan beyond just shooting it out. Ruckhart needs to be stopped for good. Or he'll just keep coming." For the rest of the day they prepared. The women and children from nearby homesteads were brought to the Naylor place for safety. Firing positions were established, water barrels filled, ammunition distributed. Vincent, despite his injury, proved invaluable in organizing their defenses, drawing on his cavalry experience. As dusk approached, Georgiana found Vincent standing on the porch, looking out at the gathering darkness. His side was clearly paining him, but he stood straight, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. "You should be resting," she chided gently, joining him. "I'll rest when this is over." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "You should be with the other women in the root cellar." "I can shoot as well as any man here," Georgiana replied. "Better than most. My father made sure of that." Vincent smiled slightly. "Somehow, that doesn't surprise me." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the eastern sky. "If we survive this," Vincent said suddenly, "would you consider coming away with me? Not right away," he added hastily, seeing her startled expression. "But someday. There's good land up north, near the Canadian border. Beautiful country. A man could build something there, with the right partner." Georgiana felt her heart quicken. "Are you asking me to marry you, Vincent Thornton?" He turned to face her fully. "I reckon I am. It's fast, I know. Crazy even. We barely know each other. But sometimes life doesn't give you the luxury of time." He took her hands in his. "I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. When I cut you free from that wagon wheel, I didn't know I was setting myself up to be tied to you in a different way." Tears pricked at Georgiana's eyes. "Ask me again after we survive this," she said softly. "And I'll give you my answer." A shout from one of the lookouts interrupted them. "Riders coming, at least 15, maybe more." Vincent's expression hardened as he turned toward the sound. "Stay close to me," he said to Georgiana, "whatever happens." The battle for the Naylor homestead began with a hail of bullets fired from Ruckhart's men as they charged across the open ground. But the defenders were well positioned, and the first volley drove the attackers back with 2 men down. For hours the fight continued in fits and starts. Ruckhart's men tried several approaches, but each time they were repelled by the determined defense. Vincent moved among the defenders, calm under fire, directing their efforts with the precision of a military officer. As midnight approached, an eerie lull fell over the battlefield. The attackers had pulled back to regroup, and the defenders took the opportunity to check their wounded and replenish ammunition. "They're planning something," Vincent said grimly as he joined Daniel and Georgiana in the main cabin. "That last retreat was too organized." As if to confirm his words, a flaming arrow suddenly arced through the night sky, landing on the roof of the barn. Within moments, more followed, and the dry wood caught fire quickly. "They're trying to burn us out!" Daniel shouted, organizing men to form a bucket line from the well. In the confusion, a group of Ruckhart's men used the diversion to approach the cabin from the blind side. Georgiana spotted them just as they reached the door. "Vincent, behind us!" She fired through the window, dropping 1 man, as Vincent whirled to face the new threat. The door burst open, and 3 men rushed in, guns blazing. Vincent tackled Georgiana to the floor, shielding her with his body as bullets splintered the wood around them. He returned fire, his shots finding their marks with deadly accuracy. 2 intruders fell. but the third got off a shot that caught Vincent in the shoulder, spinning him around. Before the man could fire again, Georgiana raised her pistol and shot him squarely in the chest. "Vincent!" She crawled to his side as he slumped against the wall, blood soaking his shirt anew. "I'm all right," he gasped, though his face was gray with pain. "Just a scratch." Outside, the battle had intensified. The barn was fully engulfed in the flames now, illuminating the yard in a hellish glow. Ruckhart's men had used the fire to advance closer to the house, and the defenders were being pushed back. Daniel burst through the door, his face blackened with smoke. "We can't hold them much longer. We need to get the women and children out through the back while we still can." "No," Vincent said, struggling to his feet with Georgiana's help. "There's another way." He staggered to the window, peering out at the chaotic scene. "Where's Ruckhart?" Daniel pointed to a figure on horseback, directing the attack from a small rise about 100 yards away. The coward staying safely out of range. Vincent nodded, a plan forming. "Get everyone inside the cabin, all of them. Then fire the rest of the outbuildings yourselves." "What?" Daniel looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Trust me," Vincent insisted. "Make it look like you're abandoning the main house. Draw them in. I'll take care of Ruckhart." Daniel hesitated, then nodded sharply. "You've got 5 minutes before we light the fires." As Daniel left to organize the retreat, Georgiana helped Vincent strap on his gun belt. "What are you planning?" "Cut off the head and the body dies," Vincent said grimly. "As long as Ruckhart lives, this won't end." "You're going after him? Alone?" "You can barely stand." "I can do what needs doing." Vincent checked his pistol. "I need you to create a diversion on the south side of the property, something to draw attention away from the rise where Ruckhart's watching." Georgiana wanted to argue, to insist on accompanying him, but she recognized the determination in his eyes. "Be careful," she said instead, pressing a quick kiss to his lips. Vincent slipped out the back of the cabin as the defenders set fire to the remaining outbuildings, creating the impression that they were abandoning the property. As predicted, Ruckhart's men surged forward, believing victory was at hand. Georgiana moved to the south edge of the property, where a small shed still stood untouched. Taking a deep breath, she lit a lantern and tossed it through the window. The dry hay inside caught immediately, creating a spectacular blaze that drew shouts and attention. In the confusion, no one noticed a lone figure working his way up the back of the rise where Edgar Ruckhart sat on his horse, watching the homestead burn with satisfaction. Vincent approached silently, years of scouting experience serving him well despite his injuries. When he was 20 feet away, he cocked his pistol, the sound carrying clearly in the night air. Ruckhart stiffened, turning his horse slowly to face the unexpected threat. He was a large man with a florid face and cold, calculating eyes. Recognition dawned as he took in Vincent's bloodied form. "Thornton," he spat. "Should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Still holding a grudge over your worthless father?" "Get down from that horse," Vincent ordered, his voice steady despite the pain radiating from his wounds. "It's over, Ruckhart." The land baron laughed. "Over? Look around you, boy. The Naylor place is burning. My men are taking what's left. You've lost." "Have we?" Vincent nodded toward the main cabin, where gunfire had suddenly erupted, the defenders springing their trap on the overconfident attackers who had rushed in. "Sounds like your men are the ones losing down there." Ruckhart's face darkened with anger. He reached for the rifle in his saddle holster, but Vincent's bullet caught him in the arm before his hand closed on the weapon. "Next one goes through your heart," Vincent warned as Ruckhart howled in pain. "Now get down." Clutching his bleeding arm, Ruckhart dismounted, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think this changes anything? I own the judge, the sheriff. I'll be back in my house by tomorrow, and you'll be swinging from a rope." "No," came a new voice from behind him. "You won't." Sheriff James Taylor stepped into view, accompanied by 3 deputies and a distinguished-looking man in a city suit. "Evening, Thornton," the sheriff nodded to Vincent. "Saw the fires from town. Figured Ruckhart had finally gone too far." "Who's this?" Vincent asked, indicating the well-dressed stranger. "Federal Marshal Hobson," the man introduced himself. "I've been investigating Mr. Ruckhart for land fraud, intimidation, and suspected murder across 3 territories." He looked at Ruckhart with cool disdain. "You've been busy, Edgar." "Very busy indeed." "This is absurd," Ruckhart blustered. "I'm the victim here. These people attacked my men." "After you tried to murder my sister," came Daniel Naylor's voice as he joined the group, supporting a limping Georgiana. "After you terrorized honest homesteaders for years." "We have sworn statements from a dozen witnesses," Marshal Hobson continued, producing a sheaf of papers from inside his coat, "including some of your own men who were willing to turn state's evidence rather than hang beside you." As the deputies moved to handcuff Ruckhart, the fight seemed to go out of him. He sagged in their grip, suddenly looking old and defeated. "Get him out of here," the sheriff ordered, "and send men to round up any of his gang that are still alive." As Ruckhart was led away, Vincent finally allowed himself to slump against a boulder, the last of his strength ebbing. Georgiana was at his side instantly, supporting him. "You did it," she whispered, her face streaked with soot but radiant with relief. "It's over." "Not quite," Vincent said, his voice faint but determined. He looked up at her with eyes that, despite his pain, shone with love. "You still owe me an answer, remember?" Georgiana laughed through sudden tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Vincent Thornton. I will marry you and go north or south or anywhere else you want to go, as long as we're together." The first light of dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains as they sealed their promise with a kiss, witnessed by the sheriff, the marshal, and Daniel, who shook his head in bemused acceptance of his sister's choice. "You realize you're getting the most stubborn woman in the territory," he warned Vincent. "I'd expect nothing less from a woman I found tied to a wagon wheel who was still fighting," Vincent replied with a weak grin. "Wouldn't have it any other way." 5 years later, the Thornton Ranch in northern Montana Territory was thriving. The log house Vincent had built with his own hands had expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. 3-year-old William was chasing his 2-year-old sister, Elizabeth, around the front yard, while Georgiana sat on the porch, rocking her newest baby, Catherine, born just 3 months earlier. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, smiling as she recognized the rider approaching from the south pasture. Vincent dismounted with the easy grace that had first caught her attention years ago. Though he sometimes still favored his right shoulder in cold weather, a permanent reminder of that night at the Naylor homestead. "How are my girls?" he asked, climbing the porch steps to kiss his wife and gently stroke the sleeping baby's cheek. "We're fine." Catherine finally decided to nap. Georgiana studied her husband's face, still handsome despite the new lines around his eyes. "How's the new stallion working out?" "He's a fine animal, should sire strong foals." Vincent sat beside her, watching their older children play. Letter came from Daniel. He and Sarah are expecting their second child in the fall. After Ruckhart's arrest and eventual hanging, Daniel had married the schoolteacher from Promise Creek and taken over the running of the Naylor homestead. With Ruckhart's criminal empire dismantled by Marshal Hobson, peace had returned to the region, allowing honest ranchers and farmers to prosper. Vincent and Georgiana had stayed at the Naylor place just long enough for Vincent's wounds to heal and for them to be married by the local preacher. Then, true to his word, Vincent had taken his bride north to the fertile valley he'd discovered during his scouting days. With Daniel's blessing and financial backing, they'd established a horse ranch that was now becoming known throughout the territory for its quality stock. "I was thinking," Vincent said, taking Georgiana's free hand in his, "about that day I found you." "What about it?" she asked, squeezing his fingers affectionately. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd taken a different trail that day? If I hadn't come across you tied to that wagon wheel?" Georgiana considered the question seriously. "I think you would have found me anyway," she said finally. "Maybe not that day, but somehow. I believe we were meant to find each other." Vincent smiled, the special smile he reserved only for her. "That's a mighty romantic notion for a practical woman like yourself." "You've made me romantic," she countered. "And you're changing the subject. What made you think of that day?" Vincent's expression grew more serious. "I rode by the old boundary marker today, the one that shows where Blackfoot territory used to begin, before the government pushed them further north. Made me think about choices, about paths taken and not taken." He looked out at their children, at the prosperous ranch they had built together. "When I told you she's mine to keep, I had no idea what I was really saying, no idea that those words would lead to all of this. Georgiana leaned her head against his shoulder. "Are you happy with where that path led you?" "Happier than I ever thought possible." Vincent put his arm around her, drawing her and the baby closer. "I thought I was rescuing you that day, but the truth is, you rescued me right back. Gave me a reason to stop wandering, to build something lasting." "We rescued each other," Georgiana corrected softly, "and we'll keep doing it every day for the rest of our lives." As the sun set behind the mountains that cradled their valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Vincent Thornton looked at his family, at the life he'd never dared dream possible, and silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him down that trail 5 years ago, to a woman tied to a wagon wheel who had captured his heart with her courage and determination. From punishment to promise, from desperation to destiny, their love story had begun in the harshest circumstances but had bloomed into something beautiful and enduring. The wagon wheel that had once been an instrument of cruelty had become, in Vincent's memory, the turning point that had changed everything for the better. As twilight deepened and the first stars appeared overhead, Vincent gathered his family close, knowing with absolute certainty that he would spend the rest of his life grateful for the day he had cut those ropes and claimed Georgiana as his, to keep not as a possession, but as the other half of his soul, the heart of the home they had built together in this wild, beautiful country they both loved.